sorting out the live stream and the recordings, and to Phil for his due diligence on his notes. We'll make a quick start. If you can be live stream and the recordings, and to Phil for his we're going to try and get that into the, on his notes, into the chat. We'll make a quick start and have a go at the roll call. Hopefully Phil's going to do a live stream and the recordings, and to Phil for his I'm not overly happy about how the roll call's going, but we'll make a quick start. We'll start the live stream and the recordings, and Phil for his we're going to try and get that into the, I know people on the live stream like to see who we are, and because they can't see our badges in Zoom, we've got this issue. So we'll try and go down it in a moment. But in the meantime, I'll just spin through the takeaways from the last meeting, just to check that we haven't missed anything or there's nothing glaring that we should have on the agenda today. So the takeaways from last week were retiring the Telegram group, or the one of the Telegram groups, which I think we've done. I don't know whether anybody's got any questions about that. I think that seems to work well. We're going to keep the tip discussions going in Keybase. I think that's now mute because we're all over on Slack, and that seems to be working quite well. Allow all proposals to bake for a week. I think that's a good proposal, but I think with Slack we can maybe move that forward a bit quicker, but I think we'll bear that in mind if we're going to talk about anything in particular. Try to reach consensus in Keybase ahead of time. Well, that changed to Slack, and I think we're doing that. I've taken a couple of things off the agenda today because I was getting a feeling that we've spoken about those already. We need to plan to how we're going to vote proposals on meetings. Chair leadership roles, that's all done. I think the rest of it is pretty straightforward. So I'm happy to move on to point one, which is Douglas's heads up, unless we feel we want to have a go at the roll call. What's people's feelings on that? Do we want to talk through the roll call, or do we want to have a go at getting Douglas to crack on?
I think if folks sign in the chat as well as in the document, that's adequate for the roll call.
Okay, then I think we'll leave it to that then. I think if the first time you speak, and today I really would like to think that we could get different people with their point of view. I know it's been, the last two have been very heavy with Douglas. I mean, that's part and parcel of what we're doing, I suppose. But if we could get other people coming in and voicing opinions, just to show that we have got a wide range, and we welcome a wide range of opinions. If I think the first time you speak, if you could say your name and your area of influence, whether you are a block producer candidate or you are part of the community, if you just say your name up first time, then I think people know who you are and they can check on the live feed. I think that will work quite well. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Douglas for his sort of the Telos weekly report and a quick heads up. I think he's got an announcement as well. So over to you, Douglas.
Thanks very much, Jim. Really quick, I'm going to keep the weekly report high level because we are going to actually also have our working group chairs give a report for each. So high level, much of this week has been taken up with sorting out our productivity tools. It sounds unimportant, but it's been frustrating, and I'm very happy that we've found a solution. So that's just a little bit of business we've done. One of the things we've done this week is that all groups now have consolidated, worked through, found their teams, found their chairs, and begun work. Everybody is on a Trello. If your group is not yet on a Trello and doesn't have a weekly call arranged that does not conflict with any other groups, then you still have a bit of work to do, but almost everyone is there, which is actually a great place to be. I feel like the work is really beginning, and we've had a lot of outreach, both out from the group and also coming into us and responding to people who are approaching us. And I can't understate how well we have grown in this past week in all areas, technical, organizational, and in our outreach to the community. So I feel very good. We will go one by one, but along those lines, I'd like to introduce Michael Gucci. He's a founder of Z-Meta, which is a VC group that that has several affiliations with very well-known groups to us. One of those currently is EOS AirdropsDAC, which is a group that on EOS helps provide essentially airdrops as a system
group that
as a service. I'm sorry,
and that has several affiliations with very well-known groups to us.
In all ways,
one of those
that being one of them, but that's just a start. So, and what I really like is that Michael has been so excited about this that he's willing to come out and join us publicly. So I just wanted to introduce him. Michael, take it away.
Good morning. Thank you. And it's my pleasure to offer our support to Telos community. I'm Michael Gucci, founder of Z-Meta. We have been in this space for a while. We have investments in ShapeShift, BTC Media, that's the company behind Bitcoin Magazine and distributed conferences, and many traditional companies. In addition, we have been significant investors in EOS itself, and we have invested in several projects on EOS. So we have lots of projects going on the EOS side, and I am very hopeful to bring all our experience from there and help the Telos community. We just launched a accelerator in Chicago. It's called Z11K, and we will be encouraging our applicants to use a Telos platform to build on. And as VCs, we get lots of applications, and when we direct our funding, that sort of influences the decision of the developers in which way they go. And I think that will be very good for Telos. On EOS, we also provide airdrops as a service. We are the third largest RAM holders there. We hold 1.58 gigabits of RAM on EOS mainnet, and we have reserved that for the developers. And I think that's what the Telos Foundation is doing, right? So in our model here in Telos, we don't need to hold so much RAM. We can always buy at the published price. But we provide airdrops as a service from end to end. That means, from providing legal services, accounting services, advisor, mentorship, funding, all the way to airdrops and ICO or airgrab, whichever method they choose. And I think that will be very good, and our experience there will be very helpful to Telos as well. So it's I hope to bring all the experience that we have and help you in any way we can. And it's a pleasure and honor to express our support for Telos.
Thank you very much, Michael. We really appreciate your support, and we are looking forward to working with you in the coming days ahead. Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, I think I'd like to echo that. It seems like that's must be really, really important for us to have these partners on board. So yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you.
Jim, back to you, sir.
Okay, thank you. All right, and on the agenda. With these agendas are going to change as we move forward, but I've put sort of point 2, which is working group updates, and it was my hope or my idea that people would edit those and put in anything they want to talk about with each of the groups. Now, whether we want to have a go at that today or whether we want to skip to the next item, if the working groups aren't particularly ready, I think this week, now we've got Slack up and running, I can be checking with each of the groups to see if they want to come on. So a feeling from the meeting, is there anybody who wants to come on and talk about their working group in particular? And if so, we have Rob to go first. I don't know whether that's what you want to do, Rob.
Yeah, that sounds fine. There's actually something later on in the agenda to discuss, so I can keep it high level right now, and then we can get into the deeper conversation later. So the bounty system working group, I've been working with James mostly, and I know Douglas had contributed early on with the method B proposal, but what we've spent time doing over the last week was actually creating a well-formed proposal, or starting a draft at least, that goes into more depth about how a Method A contribution tracking would work. You can view that link in the agenda. It's also, it's on GitHub now, so we've also created a tips repo and put this proposal in there. So we can talk more about that later in the voting section to vote on this tip. But mostly that's where our energy's gone, is thinking through all of the edge cases and scenarios that will arise as a result of implementing a bounty system for the Telos founders rewards pool.
Okay, thanks a lot for that. Code generation, do you want to go next, or is there anybody who wants to speak about code generation? Okay. Is there anybody on that list who...
I can speak for code generation.
Thank you very much. Could you just say name and... name?
Yes, sure. I'm Ed Silva. I'm working for Good Block, and I am working on the monitor and on the Telos project. Today I'm working on the voting weight stake. We are almost done with this functionality, and also there's an update on the monitor where I can show, where I can display the voting percentage. Also, Craig is working on the claim rewards, and he found an issue yesterday, and he committed that thing, which could avoid manipulation of producers in getting into the first 21, and then just like manipulate the claim rewards while he is a producer. So the bug was fixed, as each standby producer has to be on top at least 12 hours producing blocks. Now he created like a if statement for that, and it's fixed. Peter is working on rotating producers with the standbys, and this is on the very early stage.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just point out, these are actually major foundational changes that we're making in the contract section, but these are big. But these are really big changes, and I think I can't understate how hard these guys are working and how much progress we're actually making. So I want to thank the code. I want to thank and by the way, also code generation, code testing have been, I believe, merged into something called development.
Yeah, this is Marlon with EOS Miami. That was actually what I was going to say, to just quickly chime in and give you guys an update. So we did merge both groups. Our first official meeting is tomorrow. So pardon us for today for not having a major update otherwise, but our first official meeting is tomorrow. So I'm looking forward to the next launch call next week, so we can provide some additional updates.
That's great, Marlon. Thank you for that. I mean, these things are ongoing, and we'll get these agendas really tight and bright. And I think as these meetings are happening, people will be able to get together and put things forward. So, is there anybody else on the list who wants to speak to a working group?
I can give a quick update on Dapps Outreach. I'm Justin from Infinity Block. At the moment, we're at the stage where we've got a list together of all the dApps and tools that we're trying to get onto Telos. We've started getting them all into Trello, and we've probably done outreach on about 10 to 15 dApps and tools. We have all the major tools on board, like block explorers, wallets, that sort of thing. We've got at least one of each of those. So I think we have about 5 or 6 of those on board. So things are going pretty well so far. So we're really focusing more on dApps at the moment.
Okay, thanks a lot. We've done exchange outreach. Anybody here that can talk to that?
Hi, this is Chen from Telos, Vancouver. I think I can speak for Exchange Outreach. So Justin is, I think, from Infinity Block. He is a chair of Exchange Outreach, but he is, I think that he's also busy with Dapps Outreach. So far, I think that we have started to work last week, and I think that Kitty from EOS Talk, she has confirmed with OpenLedger, and they want to list Telos. And Marlon from EOS Miami, they have confirmed with the IDAX, who wants to list Telos. So that's the updates from the EOS, from the Exchange Outreach group. Yeah.
Hey,
I think this is pretty.
This is Beth. I'm just going to pop in. Go ahead, Chen.
Go ahead.
I just want to pop in. We are making some strides, and the group has really come together, and I think we've got some resources that we're finally starting to push out. There's a lot of names being thrown out there as interested parties. I just want to be really careful that we're not sharing that information until we actually have like a signed agreement with them, because there's a lot of nuances before we actually bring anybody on board. So it's great that people are interested, but just don't be running around on social saying, hey, so-and-so's on board and so-and-so's on board, to the whole group. I'm saying that out loud.
Okay, thanks a lot for that, Beth. That's great. The work that you guys are doing is obviously quite amazing. So we'll keep that up, and obviously, again, as soon as we can get things firmed up, you'll come back to us with a firm proposal or a firm report. So thanks again for that. Anybody from the governance channel want to talk about that?
Adam asked me to take that. It's Douglas again from Good Block. Really a quick thing to follow up on what Beth had said. It is important we don't overshare what's happening. Much is happening, but there are sensitivities around Exchange Outreach. And also, I think that if we are looking for a way to help Exchange Outreach, the best thing we can do is work towards an announcement date, which means that in our individual working groups, we are all looking towards our own roadmaps so that we can create a merged roadmap. And that's a task I'd like us to work on this week, because really, until we have an announced date, it's amazing that anyone's even talking to us. So let's work. Let's help them out. I think we all understand the vast importance of their work, and I think that's something we can work on to help them. Regarding governance, a lot has also been happening behind the scenes. There's a lot of initial drafts of important documents that I think you can look forward to seeing in the next few days, including a draft of the reg producer Ricardian contract that will show our initial approach to, as promised, tying together infractions and penalties, and sort of closing the loop on how block producers are forced to enforce. So I'm looking forward to sharing that, and there's some other really big public first drafts that will be coming out in governance. So that's largely what's happening there.
Okay.
You actually had a really good idea there, Adam. Would you be willing to just a sentence on that? Yeah. Or should we wait? It was regarding our approach toward your Adam has some great ideas about how we're going to approach people for arbitration and some real professional people. I guess that's the announcement.
Okay, guys, thanks for that. Well, I'm down for the meetings one. Again, the meetings channel, just keep an eye on it for all the things to do with these meetings. And if you've got any ideas about these meetings, I've got loads of things that I think we need to do regarding the meeting and the constitution around it. But I feel it's going to get in the way at the moment, and I just want us to be working towards the roadmap of getting us launched, and we'll be doing stuff about the meetings in the background. But the more meetings we have, the better, and I'll try and keep them organised. Is there anybody else that wants to talk to any of the working groups? I'll take that dead silence for no then. So do we want to move on to item 3, which is the open issue regarding vote method A, vote method B? I think it's either Douglas or Rob on this. I'm not quite sure.
I think Rob is the best person to handle this.
Sure. Sometime last week, I believe it was Friday, James and Doug, I believe you guys were talking a lot about the method A versus method B at Good Block. And you guys kind of had a change of heart, where you started to say, actually, we kind of support method A a little more. Based on that conversation, I put a lot more time into fleshing out the proposal for method A. So now there's a proposal that lives in the new tip repo that I can actually quickly walk over. I'll share my screen. So ideally what we want to vote on today, I believe, is the, yeah, here it is. Let me know if you can see that.
Yeah.
Perfect. So ideally, I think what we want to walk over today is potentially voting on if this methodology is worth focusing on, because there's a lot of work to be done, but I don't want to get too far ahead unless we have rough consensus from the team. I think a majority vote on this call, whether or not we should proceed with fleshing out and building the proper system for method A, or the proper defining the proper guidelines and processes for method A, is worthy of doing, is kind of what we want to come to here. That's a clear signal to me that I can work on this for the next week with James and whoever else is in the bounty system group. And we know we're going in the right direction, because we don't want to burn a lot of time working on this if it's not actually going to be used. So that's kind of what we're going for here. Is method A or method B what we want to do? So I'll quickly go over method A, which is in this tip 2. And just as an aside, we have a tips repo now. I just forked BitShare's improvement proposal format. You can see the format in tip 1, which is the guidelines. And these are all draft, all proposed, all open for feedback. I literally just forked bsit and can find and replace and changed a few names. So this is not, I'm not trying to mandate this by any means. I think we can collectively evolve it. But this gives us some rigor to our proposals. So anywho, back to tip 2, which is the bounty system for slicing the Telos founders rewards pool proportionally amongst contributors. We've been talking about this a bit. So the idea is, rather than 6 arbitrarily chosen appointed block producers, we wanted to move to a more meritocratic system that allows more people to participate and more organizations to participate in the launch of Telos. So if we create a bounty system that's open, objectively measured, transparent, and involves some level of light governance through the working groups, we can get to a pretty fair system that anyone can participate in that's part of the Telos launch group. So the motivation is, to create incentive structures for people to risk time and money to lay the groundwork for Telos. And by doing it this way, we actually create a really nice way for new contributors to come in. So this could actually attract talent to the project when people realize, oh, I can go push code or do work for Telos and earn some of the founders' bounty. This also has the added benefit of further decentralizing the Telos founders rewards pool because we'll have more participants splitting the 6 million as opposed to just 6 orgs being appointed with that. And I think it's good to do this work continuously over time as we work together, because we can resolve any disputes or anything on the fly and as we're working together, instead of kicking the can down the road to right around the launch of Telos, where we then have to scramble to figure out a way to account for everyone's contributions. And that's very subjective. Value is subjective in general, and coming to the numbers for how much different types of work are worth is somewhat subjective, but Douglas has pulled in a compensation consultant to help us so we can have an expert that actually works on that full-time as a consultant, help us decide the right rates. So the idea is we're using slicing pie methodology to give people a fair split given their risked contributions. Contributions can be time, they can be money, they can be commission-based. So we can say, if you bring on Bitfinex, you get a fixed amount of slices in the model. We value that highly together. So, we can create bounties like that as well. So the more slices you earn proportionally to everyone else that's participating in the bounty, the higher your percentage of the TRFP split. So it just creates basically a way to use real objective data to calculate the splits as opposed to kind of just guessing. And we're using this internally at EOS Detroit, so I'm kind of biased. I like this model. I think that it creates the proper alignment of incentives. So what I'm doing down here in the specification is actually proposing a system that I would quickly build an MVP of that will allow us to streamline tracking contributions. We can even publish the real-time totals to EOS or some blockchain. So we can actually dog food blockchains while we're doing the bounty system. By using EOS, we create yet another PR moment where we can say, we're building tools for the EOS.io ecosystem here that anyone can use. So it'd be open source and available. And my proposal is that we integrate time tracking to Trello to calculate time-based contributions. There's a free one that I'm looking into called Clockify, so we wouldn't have to pay for like 50 time tracking slots, which is very expensive. We could use the free one potentially. So that's kind of the direction I'm going in. I don't want to put too much time into this until, besides the overall concept, before everyone is like, yes, this sounds great, let's do it, because I don't want to go too far and waste too much time if it's not what we're going to do. So there's a lot of open questions. This proposal is a draft. All feedback's welcome. We have the bounty system channel on Slack to talk about this in. And so I guess really what we were looking to vote on today is, do we want to pursue a bounty system that's set up this way? Would we prefer to implement method B instead, which I can pull up quickly over here in this draft? Let me see. I've got method B close by. So bear with me for a second here. I think it's right here. Yeah, we'll just review method B really quick as well so that we can be timely about this. I know method B has all but been abandoned by the bounty system group as far as I'm concerned, but there may be some unseen hero or champion of it that could speak their piece right now. But I'll quickly review it. So method B is more informal. It involves the working groups deciding amongst themselves sort of what the contributions are for each week, rather than having an objective metric. As far as I know, like maybe we could still use time here. And then essentially, there's a primary election where by people that are a part of the TLOS launch group can propose different distributions of the founders tokens that will be voted upon by the TLOS token holders post-activation. And then after the voting period of 2 weeks, whichever proposal got the most voting weight behind it will be the distribution that's integrated. So to some extent, this gives the TLOS token holders a say, but whether or not they really have the context needed to make that decision is questionable because they're not necessarily part of the founding launch group here. So I think that this is sort of hand wavy and kind of pushes off the work of accounting to the end. So I'm not in favor of it.
Briefly, can I just bring up a point and the difference between the two? Because I was a proponent of Method B originally. And what I wanted to say is Method B is still going to require time tracking for anything for anybody to have a realistic idea of how the distribution is supposed to work. So Method B doesn't get away from time tracking. You have to be able to track what you're doing and track everybody does so that they can contribute to a distribution that makes any kind of sense whatsoever. So the biggest difference between Method A and Method B really is just a matter of whether or not we're having ongoing conversations about how much this work, what the work is worth, basically, or whether or not we wait until the very end and then everybody just scrambles to figure this out. And then there's opportunities there for people to be really disappointed at the end, or to have crazy surprises that somebody figured out how to game the system or something like that. And so what we decided is that we'd really rather have those ongoing conversations, even if it's a little bit mathy and difficult to work out. We'd rather do that along the way and not surprise anybody than do it a voting thing at the very end and everybody be surprised and possibly disappointed in what their contribution is actually worth.
Okay. Can I weigh in for one moment?
Yeah,
hi, it's Douglas. First of all, I would like to say, I want to say about Rob that he's actually just a phenomenal contributor and collaborator. I can't say enough about how great it's been that he has helped us standardize onto the tip system, which we will all be following. I think all of these make our project more professional and forward-looking. As the person, when we brought up what's now known as Method B, it was because there was a lack, in my understanding, of something that was exactly what we see at Method A as being, which is robust, transparent, open, and fact-based. And so and also based on an existing precedent, right? So we don't want to always roll our own and hope it goes well. We have in this a tested methodology, which and so based on that, and also all the work that Rob and James mostly have been leading this week, and just seeing how far this is coming together, I withdraw all of our support for Method B. I think we should still have a vote because others may, but we've fully thrown our support to Method A that Rob has devised and is the author of. I think it's great.
Can I just cut in for a moment? Douglas. Rob, could you unshare your screen for us, please?
Yes. No problem.
As the nominal chair of this meeting, if you want to go for a vote, then I'm happy to do that. We'll just type yes or no in the chat, and that's how we're going to do it. However, I'm going to just sort of, for a time-saving point of view, I'm just going to say that the feeling of the meeting and the expertise that Rob has shown on this, and the fact that Douglas has withdrawn his support for the other point, and that the working group on bounty have really got to grips with this and are going with it. I'm just feeling in the meeting that it's a go. So if we want to have a vote, then let's do a yay or nay, a yes or no in the chat, and we can add it up. But I just think we should just give it a nod, unless anybody wants to just chime in and say we want to vote, then let's do that. But otherwise, I say let's not waste the time and let's crack on to the next point.
I think given the gravity, Jim, of this, I think it'd be good, even if we're mostly unanimous, to have a vote symbolically. Since it is a major, it's basically saying that everyone has to be disciplined enough to self-report their contributions. And I can understand why that introduces potential unease. So I think allowing everyone to have a voice on it is...
Okay then, so in the chat, if you want to just write a yes to support Rob's premise of going for the slightly...
JT's got a good point. We should type what we're voting on exactly. This is all recorded, so we can type out the poll really quick.
Okay.
So I'll type that really quick, and we can go.
Can I just pose a question here, Rob?
Yeah, go on, Mark.
So the challenge, I totally think that A is definitely preferable, but the challenge is in the attribution of value for each slice. So my confusion is in around the proportions. Like, are you saying that the more slices there are, the smaller the proportions to each slice, and therefore its value? So as more tasks come, so to speak, online, we would be diminishing the value of the existing slices?
Yes, that's how that works. So a slice is just a fractional unit of the overall contributions as we're all at. So basically, we're creating slices to account for work. And so if you do a bunch of work in week 1 and then you don't do any work for the rest of the month, but everyone else is contributing for the rest of the month, your proportion is reduced because you stopped doing work for the remaining 3 weeks of the month, but people continue to work and earn slices over that time.
But I didn't understand the slices as being time-based. They are task-based, are they not?
Yeah, so a slice is essentially, this is actually defined thusly. They measure adjusted fair market value for contributions. And in order to make accounting easy, we can say each slice is accounted for as $1 worth of value. So if you're working $60 an hour on some task and you put in 4 hours, you'll earn 240 slices, just to make it easy. But the slice actually doesn't have any value. It's simply an accounting mechanism to figure out what your proportion of the fixed bounty is relative to the rest of the contributions as we dynamically work and different contributions are added into the overall model over time. Does that make sense?
It does. It's just that some of the contributions, or some of the tasks, I would say, are more critical to our success, so to speak, and as a result should be attributed more value. I don't want this to fall into a time-based contribution. It has to be like priority and impact-based. So
yeah.
I just want to make sure that we're really clear on, like, we fail if we don't get this, and it deserves a significant priority and hence significant value.
There are allowances for that.
Yep. The proposal has 3 types of contributions: time, cash, and right now the cash says that the working group has to come to a consensus to approve it, so you can't just spend cash without abandon. And then the third one is commission-based, which would be exactly what you're talking about, Mark, where we can say, this task is worth this fixed amount of slices. So if you bring Bitfinex on, you get 50,000, for example. That might not be the actual value, but we can set critical junctures or things that need to happen as those types of tasks as well. And that's where the hardest part of this model comes into the part where we try to find consensus on the objective values of the different types of work. The compensation consultant, which we'll be talking about this week, should help us a lot with that. But there's still, I think, a lot of internal discussions and ideas that we should all come together and think about, like, what needs to be commission-based, like exchange onboarding, or bringing exchanges like high tier 1 exchanges on board and tier 1 decentralized apps on board both probably warrant a bounty, and maybe a considerable one at that, because it can really amplify the project. So those are some things that we've talked about, James and I, about what may deserve a commission. And I'd love to hear other people's ideas on what else should be commission based like that.
And without getting too far into the weeds, I mean, this is really interesting because especially if we did it on chain, there might be somebody out there who's not necessarily part of the launch group, but has the necessary connections to make something happen, like bring a major exchange on board. And there's no reason why that person could not receive a commission for doing that work, a finder's fee, so to speak.
Yep, exactly. So we're basically saying we're not trying to hoard the rewards to this group at all. Where anyone can come in and contribute. If you have meaningful contributions to make, come on in, because even though it'll dilute everyone here's founders reward, presumably all that smaller pie that we each receive will be worth more, because we've actually had more real valuable contributions infused into the project.
Right. We're working under the assumption that our best contributors to Telos may not have joined us yet. Right. And actually that would be wonderful. Right. We want to bring people in. They do. However, we do need to coordinate efforts. So somebody like that, like what you were mentioning, Mark, would be somebody who would need to come in and work with us. And they could say, hey, I have a great connection to Bittrex, and I'd love to bring them in, or Poloniex or anybody else. Great connection there. I'd like to come in. Those people, in fact, if they're watching now, I'd like to invite them to join us. But we are coordinating efforts here, and we would need to have that person join to become part of the tracking.
So this is
Hi guys. Can you hear me? Munachi from. Okay, yeah, this is Munachi from Nigeria, right? So I'm curious, right? So what if someone works with say another party to get a tax done? How do we manage that going forward?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question one more time, please?
Yeah, I said this is Munachi from Telos, Africa. What if a tax requires 2 or 3 people to come together to really solve the problem? Because we sometimes it may or may not be an individual-based tax, right? I don't know. I'm not sure how it's going to work, but if it's a combination of efforts, how do we manage that as regards the payment, the distribution?
Time tracking actually accounts for that if those tasks are based on time tracking, because all 3 people can track time to the same task. We just need to be careful that they're actually all contributing. Right. You should, just because you're sitting in the room, if you're an observer, maybe you shouldn't be tracking time unless you actually did something.
I think this is going to be where the Slack, the platform, and the working groups are going to be really important, and the chairs and the co-chairs of the working groups. And we're going to get a lot smaller meetings than this one and more refined ones. So, like Mark says, we don't want to go too deep into the weeds in this. If you want to vote in the chat now, and if this is something that you're really interested in, if you join the guys in the Bounty chat on Slack, then you can get a real heads up on it and become an expert. And so I want to ask people to vote and then move on to item 4, unless I've got any objections.
No, can I just say very briefly, this is not a vote where we're going to run off and figure out what the percentage of contributions are worth or any of that. We're going to have a lot of conversations ongoing that talk about all this. So you don't have to worry that we're just going to decide what everybody's contributions are worth next. We have a long process for that.
Yeah, and to Munachi's point, because and by the way, welcome Munachi. We're very happy to have Telos Africa join the group also this week. He has been working. He's been asking and talking about getting on board for some time, and we've had to put him off until we had our onboarding process and because of tool chains. So we're very happy to have more representation in Africa. Thank you so much. To your point. we are really working for fairness here. I think you were maybe asking about those high value bounty items. There is built into the system, as we've discussed, there is public tracking and a window of public dissent. So if anyone's contribution is tracked and they feel that it doesn't actually represent a fair distribution, then there is going to be, as part of this whole process we're voting on in method A, a way to call that into question and discuss it with the bounty system and the work group leader that you're working in, to make sure that there is that we discuss the question of fairness and accurate tracking. So there is going to be a process as part of method A.
Right. Quick question. Quick question. Now, what if someone really put effort into something, right? We know a lot of people put effort into something, but maybe something happens and it doesn't really work out. But he has really put in the work. How do you manage that? Is it objective based on? Is it performance driven or is it work driven?
Right. I think that's a great question and something we should handle offline in the bounty meetings in the coming weeks. So let's discuss that there if that's okay.
I know.
All right.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing that they're not really good points, and I think they are really valid points. And I think the beauty of this meeting is that we can direct those good questions to the correct working groups. And that's where we always want to have these. This is the high-level meeting. We come up with an issue. We're not going to solve that issue now. We go off into our various working groups. They have meetings, and then we come back and we iron those. Those questions are ironed out, and we're asked to run the rule over them. And I think that just shows that we're getting into this. And I don't want to move us on because I want to stop questions. I want to move us on because I think we can deal with all those questions and all those that great stuff that we're talking about in the working groups, and that's why we set them up.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. To that end, I want to move us on to point 4, unless there's anybody else wants to talk on point 3.
I'm just going to jump in there and say I've replicated the vote in Slack, so those that aren't in the call can participate.
Thank you very much, Mark. That's appreciated. We're going to have to tighten up on our voting system, but this is good enough for the time being. But I'm really happy that you've done that. Thank you. Douglas, do you want to talk to point 4, or is it Rob?
Yeah. No. Yes. Thank you, Mark. Jim. Sorry. Thanks, Jim. Okay, so point 4 is Telos improvement proposal 1B. We discussed this last week. This has to do, or introduced this last week. This has to do with the community rewards pool. The question is, now that we've moved forward on how the founders' rewards are going to be handled, we want to let the community know how we're going to handle our very important community rewards pool. So there are three points to discuss here. First of all, last week we had discussed the total amounts for this, and I think we can have a little discussion and hopefully move towards a vote for that. Point 2, I like to have a small discussion and perhaps we'll move towards a vote if it's productive. On how the vote broke down into sub pools. That means we agreed to take a final amount, divide it, say 20% to YouTube, 15% to Twitter, 10% to some other group, and so we want to work on what that is. Or at least discuss that. That's likely offline, and then finally nominate members to work on this for the coming week and take some ownership of the community rewards pool, so we can come to a final vote. My hope is that we can have. So let's start with some discussion about the amounts for this pool to be. Motions have been so far 600,000 Telos. And 1 million Telos. That's a lot, but perhaps that's what's necessary to get the process going. Any discussion? So the proposal that I wrote envisioned 600,000 for the total community rewards pool. That's 10% of what's being given in the founders reward pool. Chen Lee of EOS Vancouver, EOS Van, last week suggested 1 million, and I think that might have been also based on the idea that we may, there may currently, because of the makeup of the group, be sort of a European, North American centrism to this, and we may, at the risk of possibly leaving out other groups. So let's talk about the amount. Any input?
I've got a clarifying question for you, Douglas. Are we taking this amount from the founders pool, or is this a net new pool that would be established?
This is a net new pool.
Okay. That's all I was curious about.
Is it an option to start with 600 and then move to 1 million later if it's necessary?
I think it's an option if we decided it's an option.
Yeah, I mean, could this not be an ongoing rewards project where as momentum builds with Telos, people are continuously rewarded? It's not just a one-time opportunity.
Well, I think we have a one-time, I think the Genesis gives us sort of a one-time shot at this. I would, for a couple reasons. One is that we can, we have an initial window of opportunity where we can make some promises because we have somebody is going to have sort of the god power of the EOCO contract. Moving forward, I think it's extremely important that we always always mention the fact that we can make no promises moving forward because there are no fiduciaries. Just because we're launching this does not mean that we are going to be the ultimate block producers in power. And we can make certain guarantees at this and votes at this stage before activation. But once activation occurs, we can't promise anything because we do not know who is necessarily going to be the block producers. We can advise, but we don't really have any power going forward because this is truly a decentralized network.
And those are great points, Douglas. I totally concur that we can mint these things once, but we never know where it's going to go from there.
Yeah, I think we've got a great Genesis opportunity to set this up for success as best we can, and we can vote to do anything, but we don't have that control. So let's take this window of opportunity and make the most of it.
Well, I mean, 600,000 seems somewhat arbitrary. 1 million seems a little bit more impactful, and considering the importance of this contribution, I would say more is better in this instance.
I have no argument against that. It was based as 10%. Any number is somewhat arbitrary. Let's find a good arbitrary number.
Yeah, I echo that, and I'd say, as a trade-off, maybe we approve 1 million, and then depending on how this bounty system is set up, which I think the proposal will need to be fleshed a little, it's possible if there's leftovers to just burn them potentially. So we provide the flexibility to issue 100 or 1 million to the community, and then if there isn't that much engagement, then some amount is just whatever is left over is burned or something like that.
I think it's a great solution.
We might have a maximum per contributor for that group. I could also suggest we might have a separate work group for this community pool. So I think we should probably set one of those up.
Agreed. That's a great idea, James.
Yeah, I agree. Can I just ask one question? And I'm sorry if it's a really stupid question. That's the reason why I'm here, because I have to ask the daft questions. What's the difference between somebody being on contributing in the working groups and somebody who's part of the community fund?
That's a great question, actually. So, and I apologize for not having my screen share, not having this up, having the screen shared. within that, within the tip, there is something says basically you can receive funds under one, but either, but not both. So the difference is that to engage in the founders reward pool, one needs to join the group, participate, agree to have a track and have their contributions tracked on a regular basis, and sign into the shares model, right? That is for many a large contribution. What we're asking people to do for the reward, the community pool, is much lighter contribution. You simply engage, let us know what your channel is that you'll be contributing to, and what address you'd like, a public key for an address you'd like us to create for your rewards to go to. And then at the end, we simply say, okay, well, here's the number of minutes viewed on yours on YouTube, and here's the number of total minutes viewed on YouTube, and we've assigned this total value to the YouTube pool. So here's your reward. It's just a much lower requirement for ongoing engagement here. You can just make those YouTube videos. You can write things. You don't have to show up to this meeting. You don't have to participate in Slack. It's just widening out the participation to a group that might be very interested in Telos, might be very interested in sharing, spreading the word, but not necessarily want to show up to the meetings. For people who hate meetings.
Why not let the community vote on who should receive these rewards? Because we have voting mechanisms. And this way people can say, well, this was the content that was of the most value to me, as opposed to the individuals who are creating that content asking for some sort of remuneration. We could have the community vote on the content that's being created.
That could be a great idea.
Yeah, I get that, Mark. I think that could be part of the working group. I was just trying to clarify what was the difference between one and the other. And I think Douglas has explained that, and I think we can move forward on that. Do we, in the chat, we get a lot of people, we're sort of saying that 1 million seems to be the way to go. And Rob mentioned that we might need to flesh this out in the tips in the GitHub a little bit. Do we want to vote on the 1 million or 600,000 or whatever? I've proposed that we vote on the 1 million, and then we can move forward with it as a full-out proposal. Anybody object to that?
One question. It's Sayed from Sweden Corner. Is if we vote for 1 million, is there possibility to burn if that amount is not okay?
Yeah, that seems to be what Rob mentioned. That seems to be the consensus. I would have thought that if it's not there, if it's not used up, we burn it.
Okay.
Would you like? Shall I type that up in the chat real quick?
Yeah, please do that so we can vote a yes or a no on it, Douglas.
Actually, instead of burning it, I'd recommend we donate it.
Again, that's something what we can talk about in the working group. Because James, did you say that we were going to set a working group up for that? And again, that's something we can talk about. We can come back with that. I like that idea. That's a nice one.
Yeah, I think it's worth a separate working group myself. So I'll get on that.
Wasn't everything going to be spent by default? Because I remember that the total amount will be split by channel, so by YouTube and Meetup, etc., and within that by the key driver for attention. So if there's one post for each channel, I mean, by definition, everything would be spent, right? There is no unspent part which you can burn.
Again,
I think James mentioned a very good point where we can actually have a maximum for each contributors. That way, it's possible that we don't spend all the 1 million or 600 bounty.
I think there's somewhat of an optics issue. If we set a maximum for the Genesis, we set a maximum for the community, but we don't set a maximum for the founders rewards pool. So I'd be cautious there from a PR perspective.
Agreed. Can I ask a quick question though regarding the 1 million votes? I'm just a little concerned, is there any potential we might be limiting ourselves, especially if we're getting down to the level of talking about minutes watched on YouTube? Perhaps it's better to have a more fractional amount so that we can, I don't know, that seems like we might run into some issues as far as dilution if we only have a million. And of course, we can always, as you said, burn them, and then the final amount equates to whatever's in the fund. But if we start issuing slices early on, and then a few months into the project find out, oh no, we've run out, that would be my concern if we're a little unbalanced.
Yeah, I can see that, but again, I think these are questions for the working group, and if the working group came back and said they want some more, we'd have to look at that and do something about it. But I think we just need a decision on a number so the working group can go away and do some more detailed thinking. What I'm concerned about is that I've got 2 minutes past the hour, which gives us 30 more minutes on this call. So do we want to make a point of giving them a number to work on and then working that up in the working group, or do we want to carry on with the minor points?
Let's move on. Let's do a vote. Move on.
I proposed a vote. It's a yay or nay. So it's a yay or nay vote. Yay is to propose the Telos Community Rewards Pool shall be funded at a maximum of 1 million Telos tokens with the possibility of burning or donating excess unearned tokens. Decisions about mechanics to be determined.
Oh, I apologize. I thought we were talking about slices. Forget my comment. Excuse me.
Okay. So yay is for that amount, and procedure, and nay is not to support that amount.
Yes. Come to video.
Okay then. So while we're voting, we can move on. We're going to be pushed for time, I think, but we're sort of getting there. I think I'm up to item 5, which is the option A, publicly members, etc., etc. Is there anyone who can start on that for me, please?
I will, and it's a much shorter one at this point. So last week we decided that we would pursue in tip 3, we would pursue for the Telos Foundation voting a more transparent method than was suggested by the white paper. So the open question is, there are 2 options. Option A is that we make all members who are receiving Telos voting tokens. The Telos Foundation is a DAO, which is going to be voted with tokens to elect governors, to set up grants, things like that. So previously, those were going to be secret to allow secret balloting. So that there wouldn't necessarily be blowback on block producer voting for decisions that might be unpopular. We agreed to open that up, and so that the membership itself would be disclosed and transparent. The question is, shall we connect the membership to their addresses, their voting addresses? So option A is we do not disclose the addresses of each individual voter, and this allows secret ballots. Option B is we have complete transparency. Both voter identity and the addresses that they're voting are publicly disclosed, but this means we can never have any secret ballots about any issues. So maybe a small amount of discussion and then move towards vote.
Why don't you just summarize the ramifications of each?
Well, on the one for option B, we have total transparency. That's wonderful. That's within the the ethos of Telos. We are for transparency. Option A supports the fact that secret balloting is a time-honored tradition so therefore must have certain value in politics, and in the hyper the hyper political arena of ongoing block producer voting. I personally believe that there might be decisions that the Telos Foundation and a political group could make that is endowed and founded to make decisions and grants that help the network. This acknowledges the political reality that not everything that's good for a network is necessarily instantly popular, and so by having all voting be open, it means that people are going to be forced into making decisions and thinking about the ramifications for their voting for block producers, which a number of us are. By having all members publicly known, we support in option A, we support transparency, so there's no secret star commission, but we don't necessarily link each member to their votes, and therefore we can have votes that may not be instantly popular. But I mean, let's face it, sometimes things that are unpopular are right. And so that's the main difference. Do we option A acknowledges the real politic that sometimes necessary decisions are not instantly popular among the entire populace, and option B embraces the idea of total transparency.
Just to ask the question, is there any potential for a hybrid where certain things we want a secret ballot, or is this an all or nothing across the board?
I think it's personally, I can't envision one. I think that once our token addresses are publicized for any event, they are publicized forever. It's a blockchain.
Hi, this is Don from Kalios. Option A wouldn't necessarily prohibit anyone from voluntarily being transparent either, right? Is that correct?
I think it's within our ethos to not limit personal choice. So if anybody chose to disclose, I would not want to make some prohibition against that. No.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Don. I think giving people the option to disclose is the ultimate balance there, where based on their situation, which we can't possibly predict the ramifications of how that might affect them, that's an excellent hybrid, as for Daniel's term.
So but option B does not include the ability to self cloak.
Right, exactly. But option A gives that option. Option B doesn't. So
yeah, and that may be important in time, right? So we want to make decisions that can stand the test of time, not just the launch. It sounds like if I'm just taking the temperature of the room, we are at this point. I think can we do a vote? I mean, it sounds like a lot of people understand the value of option A and the ability. I'm sorry, Jim. I'm so sorry. I'm treading on your feet.
Can I just I think CJ wanted to talk. She had her hand up a couple of times, so I just want to make sure that we get her comment, please.
Sure. My concern, I'm CJ, marketing volunteer. My concern with having kind of what sounds like partial transparency is that we would make ourselves vulnerable to someone. If you know who the person is, and you don't know who their wallet is, they could be vulnerable to being paid for votes or whatever, because you can't look at their wallet and see suspicious activity. Does that make sense? Am I totally off base on this?
I agree, and I got to be honest. I understand the political element. We're seeing it in places, But I mean, EOS itself was founded on a value of transparency and integrity. It's still sorting itself out. But I think that this is a place that we could badly differentiate ourselves instead of being differentiated in a positive way. We're trying to hold BPs accountable. We're trying to be much more strict with entry requirements. I think we should all be professionals and prepared to voice our vote. And if it's a tough vote, and it causes us to be voted down by the community, that's part of the natural system. But I think we're shooting ourselves in the foot if we're going to remove total transparency on issues of voting that could be controversial. That's like hiding.
I just think that there are edge cases here that we might not have fully considered, like for folks that have significant risk as a result of divulging. Like, it would be great if we took the temperature of the room with regards to who would be willing to opt in to divulge, to be transparent. And if we had the vast majority of participants, that would be great, while still allowing for those that could potentially be negatively affected by disclosing to not have to.
Could I ask what the risk is, though, in your opinion?
Well, I don't have the context of somebody that's in a much more volatile political environment where, potentially their funds could be appropriated by another entity.
Well, I'll just give you guys it's a personal example, but we're getting bombarded by questions about the fact that we're now a standby BP, but we also publicly support Telos. And we've been very affirmed on that because we think we have to be upfront, we have to be transparent. And I just feel really uncomfortable with, all the talk about BP accountability and BP transparency, and yet we can also have secret votes on controversial issues. That seems like a complete polar opposite viewpoint.
Can I? That's Daniel. That's a great case. I think that anyone who wants to differentiate themselves by disclosing would actually have that option, and that may be a point of differentiation on campaigning. But just to explain for a moment what the Telos Foundation votes are likely to be, they are. The Telos Foundation is a apolitical organization. It's initially it was envisioned as a promotional body for the network. As many foundations actually, many coins actually have a foundation that handles these promotional duties. They sponsor conferences. They fly people to them. They have speakers. Right. EOS does not have this, and that's largely to do with the hands-off approach by Block One, their decision, probably for securities exposure reasons. But we have the opportunity to do that because we don't have the security exposure that they have. So these are decisions like that. The RAM guidance price is the really only political element that we have, and I'm going to propose that we actually, vote to hire a publicly seen board of governors, essentially, or governor or governors or RAM czar who is a professional and can manage this and is proscribed from any kind of trading or participating themselves. So these are the functions. These are not BP functions. There's absolutely no executive function or enumerated political function of the Telos Foundation. I would agree 100% if it was block producers or anything like that.
And I use that as an example, but I mean, in one moment there, you're saying it's an apolitical organization, but then the reason for having an anonymous vote is for political reasons. So I just don't feel very comfortable with that. I think what I would propose is maybe we should get a pulse from the community. I think transparency is such a huge element of everyone that's an EOS supporter. I think if we were to make a decision right now that's binding, we might cause controversy.
That's a good point, and I do absolutely acknowledge the dichotomy of ideas there. What do other people think?
I would be fully transparent if I was a voting member for reasons Daniel articulated. I think it's important that we back up what may be unpopular in the short term for long-term reasons. And if that affects your vote, that's part of your risk model as a VP. As anyone who is a part of TLOS from the beginning knows, like, there was risk associated with being a part of launching an EOS.io variant other than the EOS mainnet. We all accepted that risk and decided to be publicly transparent and a part of it and articulate our reasons why. And that would be similar for these voting circumstances. It may affect your EP rank in the short term, but maybe that's just the risk you take being a voting member. And if you're concerned of that risk, maybe you should respectfully decline being a part of it.
I think that your tolerance for radical transparency would quite possibly change significantly after you've been specifically targeted for an attack or a scam or something, because people know who you are and know what your situation is. And, how many BPs would need to be attacked before we realized that this was probably a mistake? I think it's much safer and prudent to start conservatively. And if we need to liberalize our transparency later, we can always do that. But if you start with ultimate radical transparency, there's no way to back away from that in the face of some sort of an onslaught. I know of some situations that are currently ongoing, and I don't think any of us would ever want to be in those situations.
Okay, so I'm going to sort of say that we're going to let this one soak for a week, and I'm going to ask if Douglas can come back with a little bit more detail. Well, not more detail, but if we have some more chat in the Slack channels and we get a real feel for this. So I think if we vote on anything now, I think it's a bit too controversial. I think we need to let it soak and just go through it. I don't think it'll harm another week if we just sort of wait, or we could make decisions in Slack. So let's just give that one a week. We are actually out of time, ladies and gentlemen. We have got a couple more things on the agenda. Maybe the item 6 with issues arise from the TLOS tracking we could skip. I don't know whether, Rob, you want to go for point 7, or do you want me to move that across to next week?
Well, in the interest of not getting used to going over meeting times, I think we should just move it up to next week. But maybe I can plant a seed for everyone to think about before we have this conversation. So the whole idea is, after the network of TLOS activates, there's new incentives at play, the DPoS, block producer pay incentives. We should probably collectively talk about what happens to the TLOS launch group. And I personally believe that we should set a date in the future when we basically dissolve this setup, this working group, and move to a more public discussion forums, because it becomes political after the launch of TLOS. And I believe it will help us, we can come together and do the work we need to launch TLOS in this manner. But after a lot of that one-time work is done, we should be sensitive to cartelization and closed door back channel meetings and things like that. So it's mostly like, let's be really intentional about what the work group is for and when their purposes have concluded. So that, and this isn't to say that after launch, we can't have new working groups emerge for certain purposes, but we should probably, have this active turnover of like, okay, working group forms, it does its purpose and it dissolves kind of idea. So that's all I was going for. We don't have to get too deep into it. Maybe we can have a bigger conversation with the group next week.
Well, I think thanks for that, Rob. And I think part of the meetings forum working group can look at that, because it was my idea to be getting rid of this group once we move forwards, because I don't want it to morph into something. It's going to be completely separate to something else. And the ideas that you put down there will follow on. And I think we'll pick those points up in the meeting forum working group if you want to check those out. And we'll bring this for discussion next week. Is there anybody else who's got anything on that specific point? I'm not going to have any other business, because otherwise we just go into we can go into chaos. And I'm going to thank everybody so much for their contribution. The fact that we've got up to 33 people.
Sorry, Jim, I just very quick point on our agenda number 4, which I think the number 4.2, which is how we're going to break down the subpools. So right now we're using different platforms, YouTube, Medium, Steam. We list the platforms that we give certain percentage to, where I think that actually excluded some of the other parts of the world, like China, Korea, Africa, where they're using different platforms. So,
Jen, I'm going to stop you there, because that's obviously a fantastic question. And again, let's use the working groups to really flesh those out. I think obviously you're quite right. We need to make sure that we're covering all the channels, and the working group will come back with hopefully you'll say that in the working group, and that will contribute to there, and they'll come back with far more fleshed out proposals. So again, thanks for that, and just shows that the talent that we've got in this group, that we're covering all the bases. We've got up to 32, 33 people on the call. We've managed to conduct ourselves coherently, I believe, and hope stuff in both chats have gone well. And I'm going to call the meeting to a close. Thank everybody for their work and their continued work. Doug, Rob, everybody on the call. And it's nice to hear some other voices on the call today. So that was absolutely fantastic. So thanks a lot, guys. Let's all sign off.
All right, guys. Take care.
Thanks.
Talk to you all later.